Tigercast fans, welcome back to another video. Hope you're doing well. Now, on Wednesday night, we did have a big live show where we were talking about our draft, trade and free agency strategy for 2025 and 2026. So I thought I would do just a smaller breakdown video just to recap what we spoke about and put all the mail out there so it's in one nice easy spot for everyone to have a listen to and to give some thoughts and views on. But I think the first thing we wanted to make note of, and it's very important to how our strategy is and how it's going to play out, is there has been a rule change within the AFL that takes effect this year. So prior to 2025, when it came to trading your draft picks, you could only trade out 1 year into the future. So, for example, last year, if we wanted to trade out, we could only do the 2025 first round pick. But as of season 2025, teams are now able to trade out 2 years in advance. So we can trade out our 2026 and 2027 picks if we wish to do so. And that's a pretty vital part to keep in mind and to remember when talking about trade and free agency strategy. And look, undoubtedly all the clubs have been working around this strategy that's been set to come in for a little while and making plans and things like that. But I think knowing that it kind of helps piece things together a little bit more and makes things make a little bit more sense. So I guess first and foremost, we've obviously got 2 first round picks as it stands right now for 2025. We've got our own first round pick, which is probably going to be somewhere in the realms of pick 1 to 4, if we're being honest. And we've also got North Melbourne's future first pick for this year on the back of the trade for pick 27 in the live draft in 2024. And that pick could realistically be anywhere between 2 and 5 and 6. So that's a pretty good starting point to have 2 potential top, let's call it 2 top 7 picks. Is a very, very good starting point to continuing our rebuild. Now, the first thing you're probably going to hear a lot of from a lot of people or other supporters is that the draft is going to be compromised this year because of academy bids, father-sons, and things like that. Now, that is largely true. However, the more you sort of look at the players, it feels like that all those players tied to academies and things like that is going to come into more effect from about the 7, 8, 9 pick onwards. There might be 1 or 2 that creep up into that top 5 or 6, but if we're taking 2 top 5 picks, I think we're going to get a pretty good run at the talent available. So from what Tigs was saying on this topic, that's our first priority, is to hold on to the first 2 picks that we've got, but we will be, by the sounds of it, one of the very first teams to trade out one of our both of the 2026 first round pick and the 2027 first round pick in a bid to try and inject some more mature midfield quality into the side. This is what Tigs had to say on the topic on Wednesday night.
First 2 picks of this off-season, so 2025, keep those first 2. We're going to try to keep those first two, but we will most likely trade our next first and our first after that. Because what we have now got the ability to do, and he said if there's any club in the league that can do this well, it's the Tigers. Because we've got such a young list, the club is really cognizant to the fact that it has to bring in 26 to 29 high-quality talent into the club.
So as you can see there from what Tigs was mentioning on Wednesday night, we are going to be, putting up that 2026 and 2027 future first round pick, because one of the most important things to also remember here is right now at this moment, those 2 first round picks are worth their absolute highest right now when we're at rock bottom. If we were to hold off for another year or 2 and to see how things play out, if we start winning more games, getting progressively better with some natural improvement, the value of those picks actually decline. So we're kind of, in a sense, having to strike while the iron's hot. And we've also ourselves got some NGA Academy players coming through and father-sons in 2025 and 26. So we're still going to have an influx of younger players, but I think it's just a really good aggressive move to trade out the 2026 and 2027 future first rounders to try and bring in some midfield talent. So we're looking at bringing in 1 to 2 players in that 26 to 28 age bracket to basically help support these youngsters coming through. Like as good as Smiley, Lawler, Houghton, McAuliffe, Ross, all the existing youngsters, as good as they all might be or might eventually be, there's still that you still need to get them to 50 to 70 games before you start really seeing them come into their own. So Prestia is probably going to finish up potentially after this year. So then you're sort of looking back, you've got Taranto, Hopper as your mainstays in the midfield. So we still need to fill that void and still need to bolster up that age bracket to help nurture these youngsters through and to keep propelling ourselves forward with learning and getting better with development, to bounce back into contention sometime in the near future. And importantly, a lot of this revolves around Tasmania coming in as well. So they're going to come in and absolutely pillage the draft and get all these great draft picks like what GWS and Gold Coast had. And they'll be swapping and trading and doing all kinds of stuff taking place in all kinds of clubs. So from a timing perspective, the time's now. If you want to try and bring in another quality ready-made player, while we've still got some form of currency, we've got to strike now. And that was one of the beauties looking back now in having those 8 selections in 2024, that we were able to kind of really accelerate the reset a little bit, and it's put us in a position to make some more aggressive moves in this space, which is really good. So Adam Uze, in terms of the type of player we're going to try and bring in, Uze is of the school of thought that midfielders win football. So, and for a while now, I guess the big picture has been more about defence wins football. And I think that with the time that Uze had at Melbourne and what they had in their system, plus his own beliefs, has kind of led him to have that train of thought. Here's what Tigs had to say on that philosophy from Adam Uze.
Adam is in the school that midfields win football. He booked the Richmond Football Club, and I'll stand on this, so let's see if this comes out. Richmond's now sort of believing that the game's evolving into the sense, instead of the defence, which is always will be important, the turnover game winning premierships, the game's evolving now to back to the engine room. You have not just 1 or 2 good midfielders. You need 3, 4, 5. You need that depth. But more importantly, you need the inside ball control. So first possession needs to be won. That's the main thing. And a lot of that comes from how the stand rule is now, how the game's being officiated. It's only going to get tighter in relation to head injuries. So if you obtain first possession first and then you get tackled, you have more likely chance of actually retaining possession because of free kick, so on and so forth. So there's a lot of layers to it.
Now, free agency is also a big factor here too, and don't write us out of that either. The one thing I think Richmond supporters know, but opposition supporters may not know, is we are going to have a shitload of money to throw around. We've just freed up the money from like Dusty's contract, Baker, Rioli, Bolton, Lynch's contract I think drops a little bit again. There's going to be money freed up everywhere. We're going to have, the war chest, as people like to call it. So don't be surprised if we maybe have a crack at getting a free agent and then doing a trade as well. There's some ripper free agents available too. Now, one of the high priorities on our free agency list is going to be a Tom de Koning. It's also going to be a high priority for 17 other clubs as well. Let's make no mistake about that. So I'm not trying to say we're special or one out in any way, shape or form with that comment, but just that we've identified that de Koning is someone of very high interest who does feel a very good need for us. Nank's on the latter end of his career, I guess, as a ruckman. De Koning's coming into his absolute prime, and we've got the money to throw at him. Now, he may stay with Carlton. He might love the club and want to stick with that group of players and go through with them, and that's a real possibility. But until he puts pen to paper, make no mistake about it, the Tigers will be throwing an enormous offer his way, I dare say, like I said, along with every other club probably, but I just feel our main point of difference is, one, financially, we're going to have more to offer than what most other clubs are going to have. We've got a pretty good young list, some young good talent that's come in, so they're going to be able to grow with them as well. Maybe it's an attractive prospect. Might not have the amount of success straight away as what he would have with Carlton right now, but who knows? Who knows? You got to try your luck. From a trade perspective, though, as Tiggs mentioned from his source, that we are really deep into making a super pitch to Harley Reed. And again, all 17 other clubs are going to be pitching the Harley Reed until he puts pen to paper. Maybe that happens in the next 2 weeks, who knows? And again, I want to state very clearly, this is not saying that Harley Reed and de Koning and whoever else we mentioned are coming to the club. This is simply stating that we are expressing very strong interest in said players. We are putting offers to their management or whoever we have to put it to, and we're doing some groundwork to try and make something happen. There's no guarantees with what we're talking about. It's just who we're interested in to try and bolster the club. So don't misconstrue what's being said. But Harley Reed is someone that we're going to be putting a lot of time into in a big, big way. Our age profile's probably got some appeal to it. Coming back home to Melbourne, again, similar to the de Koning situation, we've got the currency, we've got the dollars behind us to be able to make an offer. The big question is, what does that look like trade-wise? Now, West Coast would obviously want the world, and rightfully so. I'm not going to dismiss that at all. And I know I said we want to try and hold on to our first pick and North Melbourne's pick. I think realistically we'd have to give up probably at worst case North Melbourne's pick and one or two of the other future picks as well. I just think that's going to be the starting point for a player of Harley Reed's caliber, and then it just comes down to if we think that's worth that to bring someone like Harley Reed in. Now, Esтерden probably going to be into him as well, from what I've heard. But interestingly, post this show on Wednesday night, I did have a few other people message me saying that they'd also heard that Harley Reed sounds like he might be strongly considering a move back to Victoria post the 2025 season. Like I said, he might re-sign tomorrow. Something might change, something, whatever. We're just telling you what we hear. But definitely watch this space. And I know Harley Reed is someone that's myself and Herbert at work have spoken about for years as someone that we would love to get to the club. But it will take a fair bit to do. Money-wise, not worried. Trade currency, we're actually in now a better position with that North Melbourne pick. But yeah, interesting to see how that one plays out. Essentially, the longer it takes for him to re-sign at West Coast, the more that drags out, the more interesting these topics become. Grock had also heard that we're maybe taking a look at some potential smaller forward options, some more crafty, really creative types. And the name that he mentioned that he believes we've got some interest in is Kai Lohmann from the Brisbane Lions, who had a really good grand final, it must be said. I actually thought he was at one point in the league for the Norm Smith, to be honest. But Brisbane are probably going to move heaven and earth to try and keep him. I believe he comes out of contract, I think it might have been this year. But here's what Grock had to say on the Kai Lohmann situation.
We've now transitioned from what I'm hearing to getting a really nice, creative small forward, even though we've gotten Houghton. We feel that Houghton's going to be more of the hybrid half-forward type, pushing up sort of like what...
Get Jasper Alga in. Get Jasper in there.
Jasper Alga. But
I like him.
I'm going to go out and say one of the names that I've heard for that is Kai Lohmann. We've been really, really interested in Kai Lohmann for a couple of years now. Obviously, he was on the fringes at Brisbane up until this year where he really cemented himself.
Yeah, he did.
And
he did.
His performance in the grand final really cemented our interest. He's out of contract at the end of 2025, so there's still a deal there, and I'm sure that Brisbane will definitely be up there with wanting to get that deal done really, really quickly. But we'll definitely be interested in Lohmann.
And the other midfield bull that Tiggs had alluded to that we were after, someone else in chat actually, who does actually have pretty good mail on a lot of things, actually hit the nail on the head and picked it in one. Gold Coast is the other team that we're looking to get a midfielder from, and the midfielder that we've got our eyes on is Matt Rao. So Grock had also heard this as well. So Grock and Tiggs both had a little bit to say on that as per the above.
One that I've heard from Gold Coast is Josh nailed it, is Rao. Apparently Gold Coast are a little bit disappointed with the way that he's developed, but with his injuries, I think they'd be like... There's rumours that they're going to let one of either Rao or Anderson go, and based off right now, they're wanting to let Rao go just based on the injuries and the consistency. They feel Anderson's going to be a lot better for them than what Rao will be.
Now, look, again, not saying we're going to land Matt Rao, but if there's a squeeze on between he and Noah Anderson and we can play a part in it, you know, he's a ball-winning extractor. I kind of feel like he did dip in a little bit in performance since his first shoulder injury. But yeah, maybe a change of scenery is what he needs. So yeah, Matt Rao is another one that we're keeping an eye on and getting in the ear of. So there you go. There is a bit of a wrap from the Wednesday night show about our trade and free agency targets. Going to be very, very interesting to see what transpires. It's probably the first time we've gone super early in terms of putting names out of who we're interested in. And again, we're not saying they're all coming to the club. It's just that they're players that we're showing strong interest in and would love to get across if we can make it happen. But there's going to be a lot of clubs doing the same thing to those players. So we're not unique in that sense. But we thank Tigs and Grock for their info and mail. And we'll definitely keep watching this space until Harley Reed, until De Koning, until Rao or Lohmann, until they all put pen to paper. It'll definitely be a watch this space throughout 2025.